Hello and welcome to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast by College Baseball Advisors. On this podcast, we talk lessons learned from people's baseball journey through the development process, recruiting, characteristics that it takes to succeed in baseball as a player and beyond. My name is Wayne Mazone. I coached college baseball 30 years and currently run College Baseball Advisor, where I help kids and parents navigate the recruiting process. For more information about what I do, please visit my website, collegebaseballadvisor.com. On today's episode, we had Jon Sjogren, who is the head coach at Rollins College. We covered a lot on this podcast, talking about his upbringing in New England, playing three sports in high school, the process that got him recruited to Florida Southern, where he played 2 years before transferring to Bryant, and how his coaching career started basically through getting asked to be an assistant coach at URI. Then at the age of 24, 25, he got the head coaching job at Bryant, which was then a part-time job in Division II, and how he really built that program and took it to great heights, but then realized there was sort of a cap to how good he could keep the program based on the way things were changing in the landscape of college athletics. So he got the job at Rollins College in 2005 and has been there since. Has had many good years, many good seasons, but 2022, 2023 were really special. More than 40 wins and made to the College World Series with a great run. So we just talked about life at the coaching in Florida, about Rollins itself, how they go about recruiting, how the landscape has changed with the way New England baseball has developed at the college level. So it's really informative. I think people all along the East Coast will find this really, really, interesting and informative. And of course, we talked about lessons learned over his coaching career about, the best players and the best people, and really there's a lot of things you could unpack from this talk. Again, I'd like to remind you that this podcast is made possible through the sponsorship of the Mohegan Sun Baseball Coaches Convention, which is now taking place in 8 days. Today is Wednesday, January 7th. It starts next Thursday, January 15th at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. This event, if you've been to, you don't need to hear me tell you how great it is. If you have not been, I highly, highly, highly advise you to check it out for the first time. You will become a regular. For more information on the speakers, the schedule, the vendors, and everything you need to know, please visit their website, baseballcoachesclinic.com. And without further delay, here's my conversation with Jon Sjogren, head baseball coach at Rollins College. All right, Coach, it's great to connect with you. I mean, you and I have talked on the phone a bit in my recruiting role and some texts here and there, but we haven't been face to face, at least on the computer, in quite a while.
Right.
Anytime I do these, I do my research and I prep so I know what I'm going to do. But some bios have where someone was born and raised and others don't. So I asked you before I hit record where you were born and raised. So on the record now, can you just talk about, where you were born and raised, and then I'm going to follow it up with a sports question.
Sure. I was born in Peterborough, New Hampshire. Lived there until I was 5 or 6, and my family moved to Framingham, Massachusetts. I was there for a couple of years, and then we settled in Millis, and so I grew up in Millis, Mass.
And from an athletic standpoint, obviously everyone that comes on the podcast is a baseball guy, so I'm sure baseball was a big part of your childhood. But at that point, were you playing a bunch of other sports too, or just baseball?
Yeah, I played football, basketball, and baseball. And to be honest with you, football was my favorite sport. I just wish I was good at it. So ended up, ended up playing baseball through. I played all three sports through high school, and then just strictly played baseball in college.
Okay, so all through you played the three sports in high school.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I I'm different than a lot of people in that I'm not really a huge sports fan. I love baseball, I love football, and some other things. I can't watch like women's lacrosse. No offense. I just like some people love all that. But I always would say, even when I was coaching in college, that football was kind of my favorite sport. So why do you say that? Was it just the love of the game?
I don't know. I mean, I really like the game. I like kind of when you look at a play, everybody doing their job and angle blocks and setting things up and being able to execute, whether big or small, or if you have leverage, then you're able to make plays and to be able to recognize that leverage. I was kind of intrigued by it. and then and I liked hitting people too, so I guess that's part of it.
And you and I mean, are of the same age where back when we played, you played everything. I played multiple sports. I mean, the amount of kids now that play three high school sports like you did is just very, very small. Are you one of those guys that understands times that are just going to change, or is that frustrating for you at all?
I don't think it's frustrating. I mean, the school I went to was a smaller one too, so you didn't have to be really, really good to make the team. Um, but there were some very, very good players. There just wasn't much depth.
Right,
So you know, I, it frustrates me a little bit because I think there's a lot of things to be learned in all those games. There's some conditioning pieces. You learn to play when you're sore and you're beaten up. You know, I, what's the line? The only day that you're 100% healthy is the first day of spring training.
right, right,
And you have to be able to play when you're nicked up and sore and the sun's not out and you're cold and wet and miserable. Like you have to be able to perform. And I think you learn those different things from different sports. And now they get lost. And I think the competition piece too. To really compete with your teammates and to try to win a game, regardless of what that game is. I think that's vitally important to development and to making sure that when you do get in the baseball arena that you're playing to win. It isn't playing to have three innings and two at bats and make sure everything's even.
right.
And I think that's the value in the other sports because they're in season in those other things. It's not like an off season game where, we're just kind of playing for the sake of playing.
Yeah, I agree. And I especially, the newer thing of the pitcher only, which listen, at some point you do specialize, but if you're a 13, 14-year-old kid and you're only a pitcher, only playing baseball, you don't get to compete enough. You better figure out some other ways to compete to work that muscle. So I totally agree with what you're saying. Um, do you remember? Obviously, I know you started your college career at Florida Southern and
Yep.
then went to Bryant. How in the world did you get from Mass to
Oh,
Florida
I lost
Southern?
you.
Oh, you did? If that happens again for whatever reason, I'll just pause it. But um, how in the world did you get from Massachusetts to Florida Southern?
So there was a scout from Rhode Island named Chet Nichols. I think he was with the Red Sox. His son, Bumpy Nichols, was the assistant coach at Florida Southern at the time. And Bumpy is still scouting down in Florida now, believe it or not.
Wow.
But Bumpy would come to Massachusetts and New England, on the recommendation of his father, I believe. I didn't know much about it then. Um, and then find players. He got Mark Angelo from Reading, Massachusetts. Glenn Fernandez was from Plymouth. I was from Millis. So there was a connection there, and Bumpy would take a year or take an annual trip to and find guys that he wanted to bring down. Um, and I was contemplating going to Northeastern um, and trying to play football at that point, and then
Wow.
football and baseball, or that was what my thought process was. And then basically my father made the decision for me. I walked through the door and he had the newspaper up and put the newspaper down and said, "If you play football, you're going to get killed. Just go play baseball in Florida." And that was how my college decision got made for me. So I was there for 2 years, and then I transferred to Bryant and graduated from Bryant in '88.
So what was the experience like? Basically, I'm assuming you weren't that, familiar with Florida by the time you showed up down there. Was that a complete transition to go to college
It
down
was a
there?
complete transition from not the school and the people, and I was the Massachusetts school system I was in, and probably everybody was in at that point, really prepared us well for higher education. We were kind of set to take the classes. It was like the next logical step from the classes we were in, but playing baseball in late August and having 70 guys that were there. There was a JV team, the varsity team, recruited players. They won a national championship in 83, I think, and then we came in. So Bumpy and Coach Arnold left the summer that I was coming in. So they recruited us and then left and took the job at Florida.
Ah,
So I didn't actually play for Bump and Coach Arnold. I ended up playing for Coach Anderson, and then his assistant was Mike Gasky at the time.
oh wow.
So it was all new for all of us, and I mean, it was great. It was a great experience. I mean, such competitiveness, and we're still like those players and such great teammates and good people, and you know, but being immersed into baseball in Florida at that time, it was such a great learning experience for me. Um,
It would be really interesting at that point to ask your freshman self at Florida Southern, hey, do you think you'll be back coaching in Florida as a head coach some years
yeah.
later? You would have been shocked,
I
right?
would have been absolutely shocked because I was way out over the tips of my skis just trying to learn things. I had never we just even just covering second base, switching coverages per pitch. And I'm like, what are we doing? And well, there's a breaking pitch, so this guy's going to cover the bag. And I'm looking, I'm like, we never did that before. You know,
Right. Right. You kind of alluded to this, but I was going to probably ask you about this later when we talk about Rollins, but my first year in college coaching was at Nova Southeastern, right, in Florida. And I
yeah.
remember getting there and going to coach in late August, early September, and I go, I am not prepared for this heat. This is like, I'm not used to this. Was that an issue? Do you remember coming from being a New England kid to playing in that heat as a freshman?
No, I honestly, I was really enjoyed the heat. I
Mm.
couldn't get I couldn't get over the rain though.
Ah, right.
Like the heat was fine, and then all of a sudden the skies would open up, and you were paralyzed. Like you couldn't do anything because it was 5 inches in an hour, and you're looking around like like what's going to happen next?
Right.
I'm looking at trees and we see if the trees are going to come down or not. But I actually enjoyed playing in the heat. I really did.
Okay, that's good. So then after your sophomore year, you go to Bryant. Um, Obviously now you sort of go back to where the area, the New England area that you were from. How did that transition come? Did you just say, "Hey, I want to go back, closer to home"? How did that come about?
I think it was more um, me being immature. Um, I had, like I said, I learned a ton, was dressed all the time. I wasn't playing as much as I wanted to.
Right.
Um, and Coach Anderson said, we're thinking about moving you to first base and doing this and doing that. And I was just like, that's just a whole lot more question marks as to what's going to happen for me. Um, and you know, he he really wanted me to stay, and I wanted to stay, but I didn't know if I wanted to learn a position. I didn't know if I'd be any good at that position. Um, and I was too immature to say, you know what, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And so I transferred to Bryant. My one of the coaches I had, Ron Panolo, he was a Legion coach of mine. Um, had made a couple phone calls, and I had settled in on Bryant, and they were excited for me to come, and it was a good experience there too.
And again, back to that, would you have guessed at that point that you'd go back and be the head coach at Bryant some years later,
Not,
right?
not in 100 years. I really just, and I was there, I graduated in 88. I was back at Bryant the fall of 90.
Yeah, so let's talk about that because again, I knew a lot about you, but then there was a lot of things that I didn't know. So after college, you start coaching right away at Rhode Island?
No, I spent that summer trying to keep playing and
Ah,
I ended
okay,
up
good.
stealing
Yeah.
base and tore my thumb up, had to have surgery, and that was basically the end of it. So I spent that fall trying to figure out what I was going to do. Had a couple of jobs, some stuff that I had to put a tie on, some stuff that I didn't. Nothing was clicking. And I got a phone call from Dave Morris, the head coach at URI at the time. And he asked me if I wanted to come be his assistant for $1,000. And so I did. So actually moved to Providence. Commuted to URI when we had practicing games, and then came back and was bartending at night so I could do it. So that was the spring of '89, and I stayed there through um, the spring of '90, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Um, so I, figured I'd have to try to find a job, and then the Bryant job opened up, and that was part-time too. I made $3,500 as the head coach at Bryant in 1990. I was hired. Uh,
So, boy, let
yeah,
me ask some follow-up questions there. That's incredible. That's incredible. I mean, and it is funny because I was just on a website of a college program the other day, and it was head coach, associate head coach, pitching coach, recruiting guy, analyst, and I was like, oh my God, there's 15 guys, and then yet you were the head coach at Bryant for 3,500. But
but
a couple of questions I want to ask prior. Do you think you would have got into coaching had he not called you?
I don't know. I doubt it. I don't know. You never knew the way in. Um,
Right, right.
there was no real path in, and nobody that you could really talk to. I mean, if you think about, back then, um, I think the only head coaches, Harvard didn't have a head coach. I think Andy Blaylock was the head coach at the time,
Yep,
in UConn. John
yep,
Winkin was the head coach at Maine. Ed Flaherty was in Southern Maine.
yep.
And I think Bill Holloway had just started too.
Right,
And but there was only like 4 or 5 full-time coaches in all of New England.
right,
Um, and so to get a job in that, you'd have to like really, really fall into something good. Um, but so I said, I'm going to take that job for $3,500. I'd be able to live at home and commute to Bryant. It was a 45-minute ride or so. Try to save money, keep the part-time jobs, that kind of stuff. And then after that first year, in the spring of '91, the women's basketball coaching job at Bryant, this is a funny story. The women's coaching job at Bryant went full time, but that coach was a part-time coach, but he was a full-time teacher in Rhode Island. So he couldn't give up his full-time teaching job because of pension and all of
right.
those kind of things. So he actually, because of gender equity, he had to quit. Um, so he quit. The volleyball coach, who was the assistant basketball coach, got the head basketball coaching job. So now a position opened up at Bryant. And when that happened, it took until November of that year. But I ended up being the baseball coach, the facilities manager, and the fitness director. They plumped all those jobs together, for anything that nobody wanted. Oh, and I was the equipment manager too. So any job that nobody wanted to do, they threw it in there, piled it up, and uh, and I became a full-time coach at that point.
All right. So two other questions then. One, I wanted to go back to you, the URI thing. Did you have a connection with this coach that called you and offered you the
No,
job?
no, I
Come on.
didn't.
Wow.
Yeah. So Earl Mathewson, who
Oh
I'm
my
sure,
God, Earl, I know
yeah, Earl
very
was the
well.
coach. Yeah, he was the coach at Bryant, and Coach Morris had called him, and then Coach Mathewson called me, and
Ah,
and that's how it happened. So Coach Mathewson was the coach at Bryant when I played there. He called me and said, "Hey, John, there's a position opened up if you're interested." And Coach Mathewson had actually left Bryant 2 years prior to that for the job at Quinnipiac.
right. Right. It's fun. Well, and this is why I love doing these things because Earl and I coached together about 5 years at Sacred Heart. So it
Right.
is funny that your connection with that. I guess I'll also ask you this. Obviously you were stringing together jobs, you're bartending, you're doing all this. And then of course, as you said, finally Bryant becomes a viable position. But when you first started coaching, even at URI, um, were you hooked? Did you get to the point of saying, "Hey, if I can make this work, this is absolutely what I want to do"?
Yeah, I did, I think the part for me was that the players really responded to me when I was 23 coaching a 22-year-old.
Right.
Um, I got the head job at Bryant before my 25th birthday, and but the players at URI, and even I'm still in contact with some of them. They responded to the way that I was talking to them, and I didn't know what I was doing. It's just they reacted the, and gave me positive reinforcement for it. So,
Right.
I mean, I'd be talking about a swing, or I'd be talking about this, I'd be talking about that, and they like listened to me, and I think that's what hooked me. It wasn't the sport or the game. I think it was that the players responded when I spoke to them.
So, and then it is amazing. I mean, by the time you got the Bryant job, was that your second or third season in college coaching? Third?
That was my third. No, it was well when I became a full-time coach. It was my third season in college coaching, and it was before my 25th birthday.
I mean, that is so that that's a lot to figure out. Not only how you're head coaching this college team, and then the administrative side and scheduling and all that was must have been a heck of a learning curve at that point.
It was, and we had some great people working there too. The other part of it too that actually helped me was because all of those coaches were part-time, not just in baseball, but in all of the sports. Um, the administration was set up that there was a secretary that did your bus schedule. You just had to tell them when you were playing, and
Right.
they scheduled the umpires, and they did all of that other kind of thing. Um, so you weren't really in charge of your budget, and you weren't in charge of all of those things because it was designed to have a part-time coach in the spot. So as that stuff started rolling down, it became a little bit easier. But without those things in place, there's no way that the 25-year-old John Shogun could have handled any of that stuff.
Right, right, right. Now, here's another question. I know at some point you had gotten your master's, and then you even went off as far as to get your doctorate. When in your career and time frame did you get those?
Um, well, as soon as I went full time that next semester, when they go through the benefit packages or whatever, they say you can go to school or you can get something approved to go to a different school. So Bryant at that time didn't have anything in athletic administration, so I went to Rhode Island College, like that, literally that next semester, and got my master's in the spring of '93, completed it. So um, I had a coach, basketball coach in high school, and he told me one time, and I don't know why this stuck with me, but he said, if you're going to coach in high school, you need a college degree. If you're going to coach in college, you need a master's degree.
Hmm.
And his thought process was you have to have a degree higher than the one you're giving out.
Hmm.
So when they
Interesting.
graduate, they're not equal to you yet. They have to do more.
Right,
Um,
right.
and and I thought there was a lot of wisdom to that. So that was one of the things like, okay, I have this chance to do it. I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I had only been coaching full time for 2 years and finished my master's at that point.
Which just seems to be a lot to take on. Like here it is, I guess you were also young and you had energy and you probably didn't have 50 other responsibilities. So I guess you had the time, but that's
Right.
pretty impressive you took that on.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I didn't have anything else to do.
Right,
I
right,
mean, it was coaching my team and trying to figure out recruiting, and then taking two classes, each semester or three classes, whatever the number was. But
right.
um, it and I found myself enjoying graduate school too. It was a lot easier because I liked it much better than an undergrad.
I think most people say that because you're actually pursuing something a subject you really want to be interested in. And I think you get treated a little differently when you're a grad student than an undergrad. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation part. Yeah, I never liked the busy work part of undergraduate, kind of checking boxes to make sure there was enough to justify a grade. And
Yeah, right,
and
right.
in college, as a graduate student, like I wasn't worried about the grades. I was just worried about kind of doing the learning piece of it.
So one more thing about Bryant. You ultimately stayed there until 2005. So you were at Bryant about how many years total? 14, 15?
15 years.
15
Yep.
years total. Okay. So
Yep.
a couple of things about that. So in from 99 when I got the head coaching job at Post, was Takeo Post, we used to come to Bryant and used to thump us very good every time. So I mean your teams are really good, but it is also interesting, must be interesting for you to kind of see in the modern world what Bryant has become in terms of a university and a baseball program. I mean, they've become a power, right?
They really have. Yep. And if you drive on that campus, it's a shadow of, or the campus I was on is a shadow of what it used to be. I mean,
Right.
some of the buildings that were still there, you can't recognize them anymore because they've done so much to them.
Yeah.
Um, and it really is fantastic. It's such great vision um, that they, in the direction that they moved in.
Totally agree. It's a really, and it's funny because again, when I was coaching at Sacred Heart, it was a good rival. So I used to kind of, not hate Bryant, but those are your number one rival. Now that I'm in my recruiting role, I'm like, hey, listen, if you can get recruited by Bryant and go to that business school and that campus at that baseball program, you're in pretty good company. It's a pretty elite place.
It really truly is. And I get the question all the time, you left there. Why would you ever leave Bryant? I'm like, well, it wasn't what it is today. It
No,
wasn't even
no,
close to what it
not
is.
even close. So let's get now to Rollins. So in 2005, how did that Rollins thing come about? I'm going to guess you weren't sitting there going, I got to get out of Bryant. Did something happen that sparked that opportunity?
Um, well, in 2004, Bryant, we went to the World Series and we won the Northeast Regional. It was on our campus. It was great, great experience. And um, at that time, we didn't have any scholarships. We're Division II. We're in a scholarship league in the Northeast 10. We had added Lowell and New Haven, and a few years prior to that, and we were having some success. We had some pretty good players, um, some really good players, and then at that time, Bryant had in '99, Bryant added football, men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse, golf, and had started funding.
Hmm.
And I'm in the corner waving my hand like, we could use some of that. And they were like, well, you know what? You're winning enough. We got to put some emphasis in some other places. And once you get a taste of that kind of success, I didn't think what we had was going to be sustainable for the long term.
Yep.
So I started looking around, in 2002 and 22 and 23, and then in 2004 at the World Series, we played and beat Rollins in the opening round. Um, and then, as it would have it, Coach Reichman left the following spring, and I was one of the finalists for the job, and then ultimately got it.
So that does make some sense now. First of all, you got Bryant to this high level, right? You see what it takes to sustain that, and they're going, hey, we're putting priority to these other places, and then now you have Rollins, and I've always viewed Rollins. This is what I say to everybody. It's like someone picked up this great New England school and just threw it down in Florida.
That's
It,
exactly right.
yeah,
Yep.
and it's this awesome, awesome place. I'll start with this. What was it? Was it immediately great to go take this job now in a better situation, or was there some adjustment to taking over a new program?
Oh, there was a ton of adjustment, and the number of mistakes I made were extraordinary. It was it was a real, real learning experience to the point that if I ever had to hire a coach from an athletic standpoint, I'd want to make sure that they've already taken one other job, so they've gone through that.
Right,
Um, Probably the biggest part was um, I didn't recruit any of those kids. I didn't
right,
know any of them. I didn't. So, the part of coaching when you get to meet the kid and you meet the family and find out what makes them tick and all of those other kind of things during the recruiting process, when you find out, hey, I want that guy to be part of my program.
right,
I had all those kids already there, and I didn't know any of that about any of them. I
right,
had no relationships with any of the kids, which would be true in any job, but I didn't take the time to build those relationships. So, you click with some people, but you don't know how to click with other ones because you don't know them.
right,
And you don't have like a player relationship. You're the head coach, so you can't you be that close to them outside of the office. So, and I
right,
didn't like it was my fault for not taking the time, but I didn't know. And then, so you don't have bad relationships. You don't have you just have no relationship.
right, right,
And that was the really hard part. So as you start bringing your own players in, then the guys that you had there that you don't really know, they think you're having favoritism and all kinds of stuff. And it would have been really easy. It would have taken about a week to talk to their parents and to talk to them and let them know me a little bit, as opposed to trying to meet them as you're walking
right,
out of the dugout.
right, right. Yeah,
So, um, but it was difficult. It wasn't easy at all. Plus the fact that being a baseball school and there's a bunch of Rollins guys that were in baseball at the time, and for whatever reason I ended up with the position. well, how come that guy didn't get it? If you gave that guy more money, he would have had the job. And, there was a lot of that stuff. And it took a while um, to get the relationships with the alumni um, to say, yeah, I didn't graduate from Rollins, but I'm not that bad a guy. Like,
Right,
you know,
right. Yeah, very interesting. And of course now you're going into what, season 20, it's got to be
20,
season.
21, I think.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And many overall, which we'll get to. But so let's for people that don't know the campus of Rollins, not baseball, but this campus specifically, describe Rollins from your perspective.
Well, you nailed it. It's a New England type price point, small, private, high end, high academic, student centered, um, and it's a very, very similar school to the ones that I left in the Northeast 10.
Right.
The difference is when you're showering after the game, it's because you get hot and sweaty, not because you have to boil yourself to feel your feet anymore.
That is just, and you know what? I have this in my notes. I was going to bring up after, but perfect time. When I was doing my research, I looked up and I was blown away still to see that you open on January 30th. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep. Yep.
Unbelievable. I
It
mean, here
really
it
is.
is. Here it is in New England. It's, today it's warm at 36 degrees, but there's snow everywhere. And you have a game. I'm not going to do, in 23 days, which is pretty amazing. Um, you've obviously run a really good program there, and for a long time. But obviously, something happened by the time you got to 22, 23, where you had these off the charts years. Any way to say why it happened? What took place then that made the program go to that level?
Well, I mean, I've had really, really good assistant coaches. And um in 17, um, when that change happened, there was also a change in my assistant coaches. Um, so I hired my assistant Patrick Zerba, and hired his brother Connor. Um, Connor has since left; he's a high school coach now, but began a youth travel program right there in Orlando. Um, with that, I got a local high school coach, Chuck Shaw, who had been in Orlando regional baseball for 25 years. So, and then I also added Jim Newland, who pitched at Wichita State on the World Series team in '89, I believe it was, and so Jim came along, and like 2 years after that kind of whole transition happened. So I got local Orlando guys that were really good at doing some of the stuff that I'm really not good at. And I
Mm,
think what we did as a staff is really complemented each other very well and got some very, very good players.
mm.
Um, we also benefited from COVID. Um, we, the campus shut down like everybody's did, and then the NCAA gave them all that year back. And then the following year, we played 20 games, and if you played 21, you used the year of eligibility. If you played 20, you didn't. Um, and I had some really good players already in the program. So at
Right.
one point, the first year we went to the World Series, two of my best players, a right fielder and left fielder, were red shirt freshmen.
Wow.
And they went to the World Series 2 years in a row and actually had 2 years of eligibility remaining
Wow.
with undergraduate and graduate degrees taken care of already for themselves.
Wow.
So, I mean, it all kind of fell together. We had a left-handed pitcher who was from UCF, and he transferred over. Then we got his brother to come, um, and we had some older guys who knew what we wanted to do and how we wanted to approach it. But I think the most important part of it was we have really good people. We those teams played 100 games together, won 80 of them or 75 of them, whatever that number was, and you wouldn't know it when they walked through the door. Humble as humble could be,
Mm,
kind. Um, they complimented each other. They messed around with each other. They were just a great group of guys, and there were no egos. And we had backups that would have had the ability to play anywhere else in the country. And both of those guys, Drew Howard and Kyle Bullock, neither one of them started, but both of them made plays that we wouldn't have got to the World Series without them in
Awesome.
different situations. Just no egos, just wanted to win, and it's so rare these days. But it was just so much fun just to be around them all the time.
That's really well said and really important. One guy I wanted to talk about is one of my favorite stories in my coaching career. So I'm coaching at Sacred Heart. We're running these prospect camps, and this tall guy comes in. He looks like a fungo bat. He's like 6'6", and he weighs like 100 pounds, and he was terrible. So I said to him, "Listen," and I gave him an evaluation from camp. I said, "You have a lot of potential with that build, but boy, you got a lot of work to do." And then I wound up starting to do some lessons with him. I don't know if you know who I'm getting
I
to.
know exactly who you're talking
Yeah,
about.
so
Yep.
and I'll take a little credit, but he also worked his butt off as the guy Brad Case. So Brad comes down to you at Rollins and has a tremendous career. What do you remember about Brad?
Well, the term baby giraffe pops into your head right away.
Yep,
6'4", 115 pounds. Had a great arm angle, and his breaking pitch complemented where his arm angle came from, so there wasn't much adjustment that had to happen there. Um, he uh, he was very immature. Um, I want to be as kind with this as I can, but he wasn't a great teammate.
Mm,
And once he got past that, like once he figured it out, and um, we had to spend a lot of time, talking to them. Okay, Brad, here's the things that you did really well today. What about this, and this? And that would have helped 25 other guys if you would have done a little bit more. Not a ton, just a little bit more. And it got to the point during his junior year, I'd look out the window of my office. Is he fooling us or is he really doing this? And then about halfway through the year, it's like, no, he's really doing it.
mm,
And once he started taking those leadership roles, his game elevated because he was getting the support of his teammates.
right,
And then scouts are coming around, and he had grown to the point that he wasn't embarrassed by it, but he was still playing for his teammates, not playing for those guys. And
right.
once that kind of change happened for him, he changed as a person. Um, to the point that I told him at the beginning of the year, I said, Brad, the best thing for this program is probably for you to get drafted and leave. And at the end of that, his junior year, he had grown so much that the best thing for our program would have been for him to get drafted and then stay. Um,
Right.
but he gave him what he wanted, and he had a terrific career up to what, a year ago now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you said that because I know him, even now as you call him an adult, and he's a wonderful guy. But and your role as coach, as educator, and that's you probably impacted him more that way as growing up as a human being, which is what really a college coach's job is a lot to you become a man when you're in college in a lot of ways. So I think you
You
can
really
take
do,
credit
right?
for that.
But to take the credit for that, that was all him and his teammates too.
Right.
The teammates recognize that stuff. You learn more from those guys when you disappoint a teammate and your teammate says something to you in the locker room in front of your other teammates, that changes you.
Yeah.
And when you get people that have the courage to do that, and understand that they're still going to be friends at the end of the day, but you can call somebody out for doing something wrong, whether it be chucking a helmet or the way you're approaching your practice or your pre-practice. If you've got a teammate that's going to tell you that, that burns way deeper than when a coach does.
1,000%. Yes, you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. Three more things I want to cover. The first is I don't think most people listen, high school kids, parents, they're not really fully educated on the world of college baseball, mostly because they're not out seeing it all the time, right? You see your level you play at, maybe you watch some college games on TV, which the game of baseball always looks much easier on TV than it really is. Can you talk about the level of Rollins baseball, the level of Division II baseball in Florida, really, and I guess I would almost say how it compares to Northeast. I say to people, see if you agree, University of Tampa, Nova Southeastern, Rollins. It's Bryant. It is Division I baseball. Those teams would be at the upper echelon of, I think, Division I if they were up here. Is that accurate to say, Coach?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. If you look at the staffing levels and the scholarship numbers, yeah, I don't know what the scholarship numbers are for the Division I schools in New England, but I can tell you that all of the schools that you just mentioned have nine, and a couple of them have NIL money.
Right.
So, the Sacred Heart that you coached at didn't have nine scholarships.
No.
Um, I know Quinnipiac didn't when they first made those changes and all that kind of stuff. So even if you just look at funding by itself, um, you know, it's a Division I conference um, with those numbers. But then, you can add the facility stuff to it as well. Bryant has a fantastic facility. BC has a fantastic facility. But, you look at Tampa or Rollins or any of the places you just mentioned, they'll rival any of the Division I colleges in New England. So it isn't just the level of play; it's the funding across the board and the emphasis that the sports have on their campus that really are the difference makers.
Yeah. Okay. And I totally agree. And obviously, weather being another piece too. I mean, baseball is a nice weather sport, let's face it, right? So, um, from a recruiting perspective, you had mentioned earlier when you had the staff that were entwined with Florida baseball, obviously, you know, all the kids in Florida know Rollins and you're going to get a good set of kids there. But see if you can answer this question. If there is a kid in New England that wants to play at Rollins, has the talent, what are the ways that this kid would go about getting on the radar of you and your coaching staff? Is it camps? Is it video? Is it coming down and playing tournaments down there? How do you find those kids that are northern kids?
Um, well, let me back up one step. It's harder for us to get Northern kids than it used to be because of the indoor facilities that have come up. You don't have to go to Florida now to play baseball year round.
It's
It's
fair.
different, but it's it's much better than it used to be. It
Very
used
good
to
point.
be, you're tripping over indoor facilities now, but the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, you had to work to find a place to go hit
It's a
indoors.
great point, Coach. Great
Um,
point.
you had to work to try to get better. You had to work to find a bullpen. You had to work to try to find some place to throw. You remember basketball practice and guys playing catch on the side of a basketball practice.
Totally.
All that stuff has kind of gone away now. And those programs plus the recruiting services have made it much easier for players to stay in New England. Um, it's easier for a coach from Massachusetts to drive 2 hours to your spot to go talk to you to see some kid. Hey, watch this kid pitch. I've got an indoor facility. I can go see him. I just drove to
Right.
Worcester and saw JP Ricciardi a couple weeks ago to look at some guys that he was, some juniors that he's working out. The third week of December. So
Right.
so that part has made it a little bit more difficult for us to pry guys out. It used to be if somebody from Florida made a phone call, they were going. It was
It's
that
a great
easy.
point.
And
Yep.
it's not that easy anymore. That being said, there's still something to be said for, getting out of you look at some of the schedules, because everybody has turf now, they're playing the first week of March.
Right.
That's not nice for anybody.
No,
you know.
no.
I mean, they're starting a conference play the first week of March because some of these leagues are that big. And
Right.
the expectation of a good experience is very, very difficult. They're very, very, very hard to have when you're talking about playing before St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
But for us, camp is always the easiest. When we have a camp on campus, that's usually the easiest way for us to do it because they're pretty intimate. We get 30 kids. The coaches get to meet the kids. They get to talk to them. They get to see our building. They get to see our campus. Um, they get to showcase in front of our coaching staff, and then sometimes even practice and play with our guys. And that
Right.
kind of stuff really, really can kind of kick it over the edge to say, okay, yeah, this guy's going to fit in our program. Um, the The hard part about high school players now is with the transfer portal, we're in the middle where if we do a really good job developing a player, they may end up going someplace else.
Right.
Um, at the same time, if somebody else does a good job of developing a player, we may try to take that guy. Or if
Right.
somebody isn't performing well at a higher level spot, then we'll take them coming down. So
Right.
we have to balance all of those things to find out if one of those players is going to fit.
Yeah.
That makes
I
sense.
guess I'll follow up on that. This may be tough to put a percentage on it, but in your yearly incoming new group, what percent are portal guys?
Well, that's changed. Each one of those have changed over the last 2 years. And each year the rule changes. As a matter of fact, I was thinking about this before we spoke. I had one division coach say, "Hey, John, you know what you should do is save all your scholarship money until January." This was in the summertime because the Division One roster numbers are all going to go down, and all these kids are going to have nowhere to go. You're going to be in Florida with all the money. Thank goodness I didn't do that because they're not cutting rosters until after school starts now.
Right.
So the portal was basically dead. There's no
Right.
players in there. So had I done that, we would have been in a situation we couldn't get out of.
And I
Um,
also feel, sorry to cut you off, but I also feel some of those guys at the end of a roster at certain programs may not even be good enough for your program. I mean, if they're not good enough for a Fairfield, Fairfield's a group, but I don't know, can the 37th guy at Fairfield play on your team? Maybe
yeah,
not. Maybe if it's Florida, Florida State, different story, right?
in some cases, but they're not playing for a reason. Um,
Right.
and if they're pitchers, the reason probably is they can't throw it over the plate.
Correct.
They're there because they're talented. Somebody saw something in them. Um, But 92 mile an hour doesn't matter if it doesn't go over 17 inches in front of you. And
Correct.
and the plate's the same size in Connecticut as it is in Florida. So, you know, uh, if we so for the pitchers that like if a pitcher's transferring, it's probably because there's some sort of issue
Right.
with command. Because there's not many coaches who will get rid of anybody that throws it over the plate.
Yeah.
There's value in that all day long.
Right.
And you wouldn't see the 10-run rule come into effect as much as it does if guys could throw it over the plate. If the back of the
Yeah.
bullpen could throw it over the plate, that wouldn't happen.
Right.
Because it's hard to score 10 runs without getting walked and hit.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, and it's funny in my business of helping kids, I don't much get into the portal unless it's a kid that I have worked with originally because I sort of feel the portal's either really hard to get recruited out of. If you don't have any stats to go on, you don't have any like you don't have a track record, it's tough to get coaches interested. And if you do have a track record and you have played somewhere and you hit 370, it's pretty easy to get recruited. There's going to be a lot of people that want you. So it's those right. If you throw on a TrackMan 92, but you pitched one inning with 7 walks last year, there's not much I could do to help you, you know?
No, no, there really isn't. There really isn't. And that's what you just said is basically what we do. Some kid goes in the portal, we go and look at their stat line, and the answer's right there. You
Yeah.
know, if we call them 1-1-1-1-1 guys. One hit, one walk, one hit batter. One strikeout, one ball to the backstop. Like all those. You just start adding those guys up, and you can't win with that. You know.
Yeah. And I did have a final question, but you just said something that sparked something else because I think, listen, I talked to Butch Thompson. He said something always sticks with me, which is you can't be old school or new school. You got to be in school. You always got to be learning and changing and adapting, right? But I think I fall, and I would think you fall more towards, and I'm just talking pitching now, a little old school style where like I see so many kids with the metrics and the plyos and the pull downs, but yet like I'll see this kid pull down at 100 and then I look him up in April and he's got a 13 ERA. And I say something's going on where he's not developing command, pitchability, a changeup. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that people are misplacing a little bit of what they're focusing on?
I do. And I don't think. I think part of it is the specialization of it too. You know, you need to be able to make adjustments, whether it be in your hand, with your bottom half, with your top half, whatever you have to be able to do. You have to make an adjustment pitch to pitch. When you have these guys that are specialized and have to mechanically do everything one way, and then all of a sudden the wind's blowing, or it's
Right.
raining, or the surface isn't great, or your land foot, there's a hole there. Like you have to adjust and still compete. Um, you also have to trust the fact that there's eight other guys ready to pick up the baseball. Let them hit it.
Right.
Um, and the strikeout is nice, but you can't finish a game if you strike people out all the time because you're throwing too many pitches to do it. Um, so we want guys that are able to pitch into the sixth and seventh and eighth inning. Um, we want low leverage situations. We want guys to get the ball in play, hit it to somebody so we can get back in the dugout.
Yeah.
To stand there and watch people throw ball after ball after ball and not make any adjustments. And I think that's where the specialty stuff comes in that actually hurts the players. Because if that kid played third base, now he knows what it's like to throw from over here and different angles and, have to use his core to stay on line and all of those different things that come into play.
Yeah, and that's a great point. It's something I tell these pitchers all the time. It's something so obvious, but a lot of kids don't think about it. When you're playing basketball, the net's always 10 feet. When you're playing football, it's always 100 yards. Yes, it's 60 feet, 6 inches, but I'll tell you right now, there's not two mounds that are the same height, the same slope, the same, one's turf, one's dugout. So if you can't, like you said, make those adjustments, it's going to be really difficult. And the best guys always do figure out some way to make adjustments, regardless of the surface and the ball and the wind and the weather and all that.
Yeah, all of it. And in the bullpen mound is built different on purpose than the game mound. So you just get
Correct.
done practicing for 15 minutes out on a mound that's totally different than the one that you're going to stand on. Um,
Absolutely.
and I think that's one of the bigger pieces. You're down there and you're throwing great in the bullpen, but the coach over there was smart enough to make it 14 inches high, and the one you're standing on is 10. Yeah,
Exactly right. Yeah. And then your first four pitches are up in the zone and you walk the guy and you can't figure it out. But
right.
all right, the last thing I wanted to ask you is up here in New England, we have the Mohegan Sun Coaches Convention, which comes up next week, which is a great local event. And they were kind enough to sponsor this podcast. So I kind of ask one like final question as it relates to just learning for players and parents and whatnot. You've been doing this a long time. You got like 20 million wins under your belt, right? I mean, you've been doing this a long
Yeah.
time.
There's been some losing there too. You
This
can count those,
that's
don't you?
yeah. Is there anything that you've learned from the best kids, the best players over your coaching career? Like, hey, if you are a good team guy, or if you hit the weight room, or if you have faced adversity, is there anything that you've learned from like, hey, this is going to help you be successful as you develop in your college life, and may carry on with you after you graduate college? Is there any one or two things that stand out?
Well, I mean, I've got a chance to learn so much from my players. Over all these years that just so grateful to have such good people, and I think that's probably the big part. The relationships that you have with the coaches and the fellow coaches, like yourself. I mean, we haven't competed against each other for what, 25 years probably now, right?
Yep.
Which is frightening to say out loud. But just the really really good people and the good relationships you have, and that you keep and continue to have. But to the players and their parents, I think when a player walks through the door and their first goal is to make somebody else better, to make somebody else's life easier that day, to kind of clear the path for them to get better. There's so much reward for that, both on the team and for that person personally. And those kind of habits, they're hard to develop because everybody wants, to have that success and to be the man. But, if you can put that off and say, I'm going to make that guy better today. I'm going to help him. I'm going to set the batting cage up so his life is easier. I'm going to stay late and break it down so that guy can finish doing whatever else he has to do. And your opportunity will come, and that will all come full circle. I think that those kind of things not only will help them later on, but it's going to help them in the short term too. It's going to help
Yeah.
them not feel the need to have that ego rubbed all the time because that thank you is going to be enough.
Yeah.
Um, it's really hard to play college athletics these days. When we played, the phone call home was, "Hey, how's the weather?" And did your team win? The only time that they would even know what the score was if it was in USA Today.
Right.
Now, in time, they find out if their buddy's not playing or not, and and that's a hard thing for an 18-year-old kid that's been the man.
Yeah.
You've got to sit down and pay your dues, or you end up leaving. And um, I think that kind of education part, like this is going to be hard. It's going to
Yeah,
be really, really hard because you're not going to be the starting shortstop anymore. You may have to try to find to do something else, and they've never had to do it before.
right.
Um, and I think that's where being the really good teammate comes in. Um, and then you're gonna have a chance to win. If you're good people, you get a chance to win.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's well, I mean, that's really a great point. And it is those, and years later, 20 years later, no one's going to remember your batting average or your
Nope.
ERA, but they will remember if you were a nice guy, a good team guy, fun guy, helpful guy. They're not going to remember all the different little minutia, which of course does matter, but years later, it's not what people remember.
No, if you're not getting called to go back for alumni weekend, then you did something wrong.
Right.
You
Exactly. Yeah.
you want to be on that list. You want to be one of the first three or four phone calls, and when you walk through the gate, you want everybody to give you a big hug and welcome you back.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
it's funny. We had a ring ceremony for the championship team for the South region, and I don't know how this came to me, but the players they all got their rings, and I was just kind of standing up there and giving the speech and saying thank you to everybody, and I said, today you guys are the best team in the history of the school. There's no team that compares to you. Tomorrow, it's your job to make the next team the best team.
Mm,
As an alum, your job is to come back, wear your ring all the time, but your job is to make sure that the next guy gets one too, that their experience is as good as yours. You
right.
know, and and we want you to come back, but this is what your job is now. To make sure that experience and walk through the gate with your arms open and say, hey, help these guys get and have that kind of experience. And if you can do that, you did it right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautifully said. And it's a great thing to end on. Coach, I really appreciate it, especially as you have the season coming up that spend some time with me. It's great to connect with you again. The guys at Rollins are lucky to have you, and I hope you keep going strong till you decide it's time to ride off to the sunset,
Thanks, Wayne. It's been great to see you. Thanks for having me.
All right, you got it, Coach. Um, Thank you all so much for listening to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast. On this episode with Jon Sjogren, head baseball coach at Rollins College. Again, I'm your host, Wayne Mazone. For more information about my recruiting business, please visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. I'd like to remind you the podcast is made possible through the sponsorship of the Mohegan Sun World Baseball Coaches Convention, which takes place in 8 days, starts January 15th, runs through the 17th at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. For more information about the lineup of speakers, the schedule, the vendors, and everything you need to know and to register, visit their website, baseballcoachesclinic.com. We have some really good guests coming up on the podcast. We have Dr. Josh Heenan, who was the first ever guest on the podcast, but we're going to talk a lot about a really interesting post that he made on social media, which got a lot of interest and attention. We also have Rucker Taylor, who is the head baseball coach at Davidson, joining us, along with several others that will be taking place in the month of January. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.